I deliver pizza, and I'd been having a really busy night, non-stop back and forth without any time to even pause to take a leak. I'd been so busy, in fact, that I wasn't really even thinking about bathroom breaks at all. But we're also going through a bit of a heat wave in our area, so I'd been drinking copious amounts of water. All of a sudden, as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go hit me. Like things went from 0 to 60 in an instant. Thankfully, I was close to the customer, so I could get this one over with quickly, or so I thought. I pulled up to the house, and it was an area that I'd driven in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't quite right. All of the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. It was extra apparent because the streetlight closest to the door just happened to be out of order. On top of it all, the block was dead quiet. This is a big university area. Obviously, there aren't many student renters in July, but there had to be at least one person, because someone had ordered this pizza. Maybe they just liked sitting in the dark, or they were out in the backyard, whatever. I just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night, around 9:30 p.m., without first checking that I had the correct address and that the customer was actually inside. It was scorching that night, even after sundown. My car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizzas next to me didn't help things much, so I had to try and pry the car door open as infrequently as possible to get some cool air circulating in. I called the number the customer provided, and the voice on the other end said kind of brusquely and out of breath, "Yeah?" I just tried to keep it clear and concise. "Hey, it's your pizza out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home?" The customer replied, still gasping for air. "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by that point that I was much less patient than I'd be otherwise with the customer right out the gate. "Well then, we're going to have to terminate the order, because I've arrived at the stated delivery window and you're supposed to pay in cash. I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me, as the voice on the other end came through more clearly as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who couldn't have been older than 20 to 25. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street so I could barely hear you," she cried. "I just switched out of my AirPods. Is that better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes tops, okay?" I know what it's like to be hungry and running late and have no car but not live near any restaurants. Plus, when I heard her voice, I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple of times before, and she'd always been very nice. Now I felt really bad for snapping at her. I tried to walk it back while simultaneously looking out my window for potential spots to pee. No, that's my bad. I'm just letting the heat get to me a little bit. It's not your fault. No need to rush. I'll see you when you get here." I hung up and, while surveilling the street, was starting to think that I was really out of luck. All of the other houses had people in them and were very close together, so there were no clumps of trees or out-of-the-way patches of land or anything. Of course, I had also tossed my empty water bottle at the last delivery, because I'm a freaking idiot. Finally, I decided it was escalating to the point of an emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home, after all, and the streetlight was out, so no one would see me. The people who were home were all inside. My car was parked across the street, and we're a small shop who don't wear uniforms, so if someone did spot me, they'd have no way to connect me to my employer. I mean, animals pee outside all the time. Humans are animals too, so this is fine, probably. I scurried over to the tallest bush in her front yard. She didn't really have much of a yard, more just a walkway lined with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her door. The biggest cluster of bushes, the only one where I could be sure there would be no visible splatter on the side of the house, was about 4 feet away from her door. I looked both ways, unzipped, and let fly. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off, more like pissing on something solid than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong. But once I start, I can't stop midstream, so I kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a key rock or something and could just move over a few inches. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise. A deep voice exclaimed, "What the fuck?" Before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbor or something, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew by me, brushing my golden shower off him as he did. He spit pretty emphatically on the ground, so I think I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but though this next part is kind of a blur, I do remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away after only a minute. I'd gotten some night vision by that point, so I was able to make out his height, build, and outfit, but only the most general details of each. I was in such a shock that I didn't even zip up. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it, and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that could make everything okay. Could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just look like they were against the house? Could they have been obscuring an open window or something? My inner voice was desperately screaming. That man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation. But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who would be hiding in the bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, it just wasn't something I was ready to grapple with yet. I was coping by not acknowledging the situation. My fight-or-flight response totally failed me at that point, because my dumbass did the absolute last thing I should have done. I approached the bushes to try and validate this "there must be a good reason for a man in a hoodie to be hiding in these bushes in the middle of the night" theory. So I walked over to the side, turned on my phone flashlight, and tried to peer into the line of shrubbery. Pro tip: as scary as things may look in the dark, seeing them with a single beam of your flashlight can sometimes make it even worse. That's when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawstring bag sitting behind the bushes, slightly splashed with piss, but I was in such a moronic daze from shock, I groped around for it thinking, see, this is it, this will explain why he was back here. It explained it all right. Once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open, I saw a sharp knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. The delusions officially broke at that point, and all the adrenaline, endorphins, and self-preservation instincts that had been suppressed kicked in 10 times over. I became whatever the opposite of dazed is, laser-focused, more so than I'd ever been in my life, with one singular goal: get back to my car. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, got in my car, and slammed the pedal to the floor before the door was even all the way closed. I went as far as I could, as fast as I could, until I hit a red signal. Then I pulled off to the side, and realized I probably shouldn't be driving any more than necessary due to the condition I was in. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour drugstore and took a breath. I was finally calm and coherent enough to zip up and formulate a plan of action. My first lucid thought was, who should I call first, the police or the girl whose house I was at? I thought about it for what couldn't have really been more than 10 seconds, but felt like an hour. I finally decided. Okay, I'm in my locked car with the engine running. If trouble starts, I can drive away. I know something's up, but she might not, so she needs to know not to keep walking in that direction. As I was dialing her number, it occurred to me, though. What if there was no girl? I thought I remembered delivering to that house before, but what if my memory was incorrect? What if it was a decoy to get me there to rob me, or worse? Every pizza delivery guy on the planet has seen the Evil Genius documentary by now, so I thought, she called me all out of breath, she wasn't home, the whole thing was off, so I can't risk it. I called 911. The operator was very helpful in keeping me calm, because I was a complete wreck by this point. He kept assuring me that someone would be there soon. I kept telling them that they had to get there before the girl did, but I was trying to express 3 thoughts at once and really damaging my own credibility. It came out more as, "You've got to save this girl because he wasn't talking to me after I was just delivering a pizza, unless they were after me, in which case they might not be a girl, but I talked to one on the phone, so you should find that girl because they used her to lure me there." Finally, they basically just asked me to stop talking and stay on the line, but that was when I saw an incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer it without disrupting my 911 call, so I just ignored it. Then she sent me a text. "Hey, I'm here. I don't see you anywhere." I told 911 she was there, and they said officers were only minutes away. Who knows how long that meant, though, especially after I'd given such a scattered account of events in my panic. I felt overwhelmed with guilt, because my rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy girl for some large scam targeting pizza guys were low, and the odds of her being the intended victim of a predator were quite high. I put my 911 call on mute, turned back, heart absolutely pounding out of my chest, compulsively muttering, "Fuck, fuck," the entire way. I took 911 off mute and told them I had returned to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past all the parked cars in the street, looking in each of them to see which one was mine. I waved her down quickly, flashing my brights. She bounced on over to the window of my car, very happy-go-lucky. I figured that was a good sign she wasn't in on whatever this thing was. I was just so scared to be back in the general area, though, and to not know what had just happened or what was going to happen. I whispered, "Get in." "Get it? Huh? Oh, you want me to get the pizza from the back, right?" I didn't want to make the same mistake with her that I had made with 911, so instead of trying to tell the whole complicated story, I stuck to the bare basic facts. "There was a man hiding in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police, and I don't know where he is right now. So please get into the car so I can lock the doors." I was barely able to even get those sentences out, and I was shaking like I'd had 10 cups of black coffee. I held up my phone with 911 on the call screen to verify it for her. I thought that was why she got in the car with no further explanation, but it turns out that wasn't entirely it. "You still there? Is she with you? Are you safe? Is anyone else there?" 911 kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them, and we drove more cautiously this time to a location 911 instructed us to wait at to speak with police after they cleared the area. I didn't actually have to do much after that. The police came pretty soon after. A police car met us, I gave a statement telling them everything I observed, and she went to go speak to more officers in more detail than they needed me for. It turns out the reason she got into a strange pizza guy's car without any probing deeper into my story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had an abusive ex-boyfriend who was apparently psychotic enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing that the man was in her bushes. She later called us to thank me and insist on leaving a huge tip. I wasn't there when the call came in, so the kid who answered didn't know to refuse to accept the money. But the manager already promised the next time we see her, we'd load her up with enough one free pie cards to last a lifetime. Easily the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, on the job or off. I don't get the chance to tell the story much, because I try to avoid sharing it with anyone who could possibly know the girl, or know of the event. But I'm still not the same since. Even though I know he didn't have anything to do with me directly, this truly shook me to my core. This is obviously the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life. I've also told this story a few times, but never to a scary story narrator before. I was 13 years old when this happened, and it's hard to actually imagine how it even did. It should serve as a warning sign to people as well, though, that a normal situation can turn bad very quickly. We were visiting some relatives out on the ridge. Getting to the ridge was a nice and beautiful ride out into the country, and our aunt's house was way out on the ridge. Now personally, I didn't really like sitting around with the adults. Most of them were sitting around drinking beer, talking about the good old days. I was never into that sort of thing. Plus, I was the only kid of my age who was there. All of the other children were younger, and I didn't exactly want to hang out with them. I asked if I could go out hiking. Everyone was okay with me doing this. They just told me that I shouldn't go out too far. The ridge was huge, and there was a lot of country to get through in it. It would be so easy to get lost there. I brought a bottle of water with me. Well, not really water. It was some sort of punch that my aunt had in the freezer. It was sugar-free, of course. Just a side comment. I'm curious if other people have noticed as well. There seem to be a whole lot of diabetics in rural areas. So whenever we had family reunions or parties or get-togethers, there was always a lot of sugar-free alternatives. Since maybe a lot of people will hear this story, I'm just wondering if other people have noticed this too. Anyway, on this day I was hiking, I noticed that there was something different than I had seen before, where for the most part the hills were covered in grass and trees and such. This time I noticed a rock face on one side of a hill. I wanted to climb down it and see what was there. As I got closer, I noticed that there was a small creek that was draining into a waterfall over the rock face. There was only one way for me to be able to get down that side of the hill to see the waterfall, which is what I wanted to do, and that was to climb right down it. I was hesitant at first because I wasn't exactly much of a climber, but I finally decided to go ahead and just give it a shot. It wasn't a very high hill, so it should be easier to get down. I started on my way down. The rocks were a little bit damp, but that didn't worry me too much. I was able to get enough of a solid grip as I climbed down, and I did so carefully in order to not slip on the wetness. Problem is that I was paying too much attention to not slipping on the rocks. I didn't realize that some of the rock shelves I was holding onto were not as strong as they first appeared to be. I don't remember a whole lot of exactly what happened, but I must have grabbed a rock shelf that had a crack in it or something. Because when my weight was pulling on the rock, it cracked in half. The fall itself and landing, that I didn't remember much of, but I do recall waking up from being blacked out, and when I did, I was wet and uncomfortable. It took me a few moments to realize that I had somehow fallen behind the waterfall, and though I couldn't exactly tell why, when I tried to stand myself up, I wasn't able to do it. I was also having a hard time thinking straight, and my head hurt. When I put my hands to the hurting area, I saw I was bleeding from the head as well. I'm not sure how long I remained unconscious. I know that I passed out at some point. When I came to again, I tried yelling for help. I actually did for so long and so hard that my voice gave way. The one good thing that I had going for me was that being so close to a waterfall, I wasn't exactly in danger of dehydrating, but little good that would do if no one was able to find me. From there, I can only tell you bits and pieces of what things were like. There was a lot of me going in and out of it. One of the only things I can remember, really, is hearing what I thought was someone calling my name. I was half out of it at the time, so I wasn't exactly sure. It didn't seem to matter anyway, as I was not able to muster my voice to call back. I did try, but as I mentioned, my voice was still a bit too rough to call out. At one point there was a noise that I heard, and it looked like I had seen someone standing by the waterfall. I was happy to finally be rescued by someone, but when I tried to get his attention despite my voice recovering, the figure never moved and didn't come to help me either. He simply stood there, a silhouette against the water. Finally, the shadow left, and I was once again by myself. I think I came to terms with the fact that I was most likely not going to be found and was going to die. I convinced myself the shadow I had seen of a figure was nothing more than my imagination. It really didn't matter if I had actually seen someone, since he did nothing to try and rescue me. More time went by, and I continued to go in and out of it. Several times while I was unconscious, I again saw someone in shadow, staring at me. The last time was when I was up for only a short while and felt like I was going to die behind that waterfall. I kept asking the shadow person to please help me out. The next time I awoke, I was suddenly in a hospital bed. I must have blacked out and remained out until someone located me. I recovered in time, but when I finally was able to talk to my family, I asked how they found me. Someone had left an envelope on the door of a different home. The owners didn't know who, but the envelope had a message on it. A young boy is injured and can be found here. Inside was a detailed map leading to the waterfall. The man of the house and his son went on and found me and brought me to their home and called an ambulance. The people who found me never knew who left the envelope, but I knew it had to have been the shadow that I had seen. I always wonder why they didn't try to help me themselves, but I guess I'll never know. I was very depressed. I had been having a really bad month. I don't want to go over all of the bad things that were happening to me at the time. There's really no benefit in doing so. But I'll just say it had been extremely horrible for me, and I was depressed. Because I was depressed, I fell into an awful month full of drinking. People who've gone on long drinking binges will understand what I'm about to explain. I began drinking heavier and heavier throughout the weeks, which just made me feel even more depressed and more dependent upon the alcohol as a result. After a while, the alcohol just doesn't wash away some of the feeling anymore. It's needed to take away the pain of the alcohol too, so it just keeps on doubling, over and over again. I got toward the idea that drinking in my home every day was just making things worse. I had the genius idea that I should go out and take a stroll. The sun was shining brightly that day, and the countryside looked so nice. I was so drunk to begin with already that I decided to just go out and enjoy the day. I walked down the road for a bit. I owned a nice house in an area surrounded by nature, so I took my bottle and went out into it. I just got drunker and drunker as I went out, and I was walking through some fields which were covered in flowers as well. I have to tell you about this because this is really one of the strangest drinking binges I've ever been on. I was so drunk that of course everything was unbalanced. But everything in the field was bright and beautiful and just completely overwhelmed me. From there, I'm not really sure what happened because I just suddenly blacked out. When I woke up, there were several issues. First, I was still drunk. I was fine with that though, because being drunk would feel better than the massive hangover I would have when it was through. It was also completely dark outside, and it was difficult for me to get my bearings from what had been the case beforehand. It had been so bright out before, so overwhelming to my senses, and so beautiful, and now it was nothing like that. I began staggering, and realized now just how far away I was from my home. Or more accurately, I realized I was far away from home, but didn't really know how far. I didn't even know exactly where I was. I found the bottle that I had brought with me, and to my surprise, there was even still some alcohol left in it. I'm a little ashamed to admit that I immediately started drinking it again. Even though I was really drunk, I didn't really want to risk sobering up. Yeah, that sounds weird. But as bad as I felt, I knew I would feel even worse if I sobered up. My goal was to try and find my way back to a road, so then I could find a way to follow that to get home. But it was hard to do because I had no clear idea where I even was to begin with. After a long while of stumbling, I made it to the road and was finally able to follow it back to my house. After all this time, there was nothing I was looking forward to more than finally being able to just hop back into my own bed. But as I began walking up the driveway to my home, I noticed right away that a few things were wrong. There was a truck parked in the yard just off the driveway. It wasn't a truck I had ever seen before either. And not only that, there was a light on the second floor of the house. I didn't let this bother me at first, telling myself I could have left the light on myself. but when I saw the shadow of a person in the second floor window, I got very freaked out. Someone had broken into my home. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police, as I had no means upon myself to do that. I was worried about approaching anyone directly as well, as I was still extremely drunk. I had the brilliant idea of getting a weapon, and then maybe entering the house from the back door. That way I might have some sort of advantage. I crept along the side of the house and into the back. There was, to my luck, a pair of hedge clippers in the backyard. I grabbed those and found my way over to the back door. The back door was locked, but I never had a good lock put on it. It would come open easily with just the right amount of force, so I tried to force the back door open, but it was proving to be much harder to do. I began to get impatient when I was not getting the results I wanted. I was always able to get this door open so easily before, and didn't think I was so drunk that I couldn't even accomplish something so simple. That was when the light to the kitchen, which the back door opened into, turned on. I was still holding the hedge clippers, and both me and them were visible through the window in the door. I was expecting to see a big guy, like a robber or something, but what I saw was a teenage girl, and she looked terrified. The girl had been frozen in place for a second, but then she turned and ran. I heard her scream something I'll never forget. "Dad, there's a guy outside our back door with hedge clippers." Even as drunk as I was, I realized exactly what had happened. This was not my house. I had stumbled upon someone else's and nearly broken into it in a drunk fit while I was holding a pair of hedge clippers. While I immediately dropped them, I ran back to the road as quickly as I could. As I got to the end of the driveway, I heard a gunshot behind me. I expected to feel a gunshot as well, but that didn't happen. Either it was a warning shot, or the shooter had just missed me. I didn't really care to figure out which one. No one came after me. I ran and stumbled down the road as long as I could. I kept worrying that the police were going to show up at some point and arrest me, but it never happened. I finally came upon my own home around dawn. I fell into my bed and slept for nearly 24 hours. When I got up, well, my hangover was a scary story for another day. This is a bit of a long one, but it's worth the read. I hope at least. I live in a fairly quiet road in the countryside in England. My mom works nights, and it's just me and her and my small dog. I'm 5'4" and look about 15. Also, I'm female. It was a dark Wednesday night around 10 o'clock at night, and I'd just gotten back from babysitting. I couldn't be bothered to cook, so I decided I'd order a pizza, and I ordered one online. About 20 minutes later, the door goes, and I open it. It was the pizza delivery man. He was about 6 feet tall, balding, around 45, maybe 50 at a push. I smiled and said thank you, and went to take my pizza from him. As I went to reach for it, though, the man, instead of handing me the pizza, took a step back so it was completely out of my reach. "Hey, my name's Danny," he said. Instantly, I could tell something was off about this Danny, but I couldn't put my finger on why. He just gave me the creeps, though. At this point, though, I just really wanted my pizza. It had been a very long night, and I wasn't in the mood for any chit-chat. Not wanting to be rude, though, I replied, "Hi, Danny." Danny smiled and said, "Do you want to save money on your gas and heating?" I had no idea what to reply to such an obscure statement, so I said, "I guess so." Danny then pulled out a bunch of leaflets from his back pocket. He seemed very happy at this point and said, "Brilliant. Well, I'll come over sometime and we can have a chat about some deals. My number is written down on the back of these leaflets, so please give me a call." I was really baffled, and honestly I didn't know what to do, so at this point I just nodded and took the leaflets from him. Danny then handed me my pizza, gave me a massive smile, and said, "Okay then, I'll see you very soon." At this point I was pretty creeped out, and just shut the door as quickly as I could. I shoved the leaflets on the side, and I didn't think any more about Danny. I was just about to lock up and go to bed. It was around 11:30 when my dog starts going mental at the front door. My front door has a very large panel of frosted glass, so as I was making my way towards the door to check out why my dog was going mental, I could see the silhouette of someone standing at my front door. As I approached the door, I called out, "Hello?" I was pretty nervous at this point, because I knew it wouldn't be my mom coming home, and I couldn't think of anyone else who it would be. I called out hello again, but this time I was much closer to the door. I could see through the frosted glass that the figure was much taller than me. I called out again for the third time, and as I was reaching to open the door, the figure turned around and ran off down the path away from my house. I thought about opening the door, but I was kind of scared, so I decided against it. I went to bed and didn't think about it anymore, or about Danny again. Around 3.5 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was around 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was just getting ready to go to work. I work at a nursery, by the way. I checked the text and it said, "Put the kettle on. I'll be around in 10. I replied saying, "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number." I instantly received a text back saying, "No I don't, smiley face. It's me, Danny. I want to talk about my business deals with you." I nearly dropped my phone. I was so scared. I was home alone yet again and didn't know what to do. I called my dad and told him the current situation. He told me to give him Danny's number. He would call Danny and tell him to leave me alone, then call me right back. I gave my dad Danny's number, and I waited for him to call me. My dad called me back after 10 minutes and told me that he had spoken to Danny. The conversation went something like this. "Hello? Hello, is that Danny speaking?" "Yes, how can I help you?" "My daughter just called me saying you've texted her to put the kettle on. She's not interested in whatever you're trying to sell her, and I'd appreciate it if you deleted her number." "Well, you know, I didn't just text your daughter. I sent a group text to a number of my business contacts." "If you sent a group text to a number of people, then how do you know who my daughter is?" "I won't text her again." "Hey, how did you get her number?" Danny hung up, and my dad said he had tried to call back, but that he'd been putting the phone down on him. I felt a little bit better, though, and carried on getting ready for work. My dad told me to call him back if Danny texted me again. Around 5 minutes later, my dad called me back saying Danny had called once again. Danny had told my dad that he knew I worked at a nursery and did babysitting on the side. He told my dad that he'd gotten my number off a babysitting website. My dad asked how he knew I went babysitting, and Danny had told my dad that I had told him. This was, of course, a complete lie. I told my dad this. He tried to call Danny once again, but he just stopped picking up. My dad assured me that he firmly told Danny to leave me alone, and hopefully I won't hear from him again. It's been a week so far, and I haven't heard anything from him. I did think about contacting the pizza company he works for, but I decided against it because I don't want to make him lose his job, since he might get angry, and he does know where I live after all.
What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find the link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run 2 other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.